Yeah, and then
Self-modifying
adaptive.
software is a very dangerous thing. Um, we're starting to create self-modifying software right now. It turns out that some of the AIs that are being written do a better job at writing software than humans do now. Like we're starting to reach that point, which means that we're gonna have sentient computers probably pretty soon. So maybe you'll
Uh,
get to be reborn as Google or
Yeah.
something.
I don't know
So,
about that.
so I agree with that, but not for the reason that you said. The reason why we're going to have sentient AI is because cryptocurrencies allow uh, um, robotic life forms, basically, where the robot is able to own a life account, a bank account, which is just a Bitcoin address, basically.
Mm.
And so if a computer program can own money, that means that it can work to earn more money, and uh, and it
Yeah,
can.
it provides it a positive feedback mechanism outside of the lab. So
Yeah, and it can, and if it has money, it can pay people. It can pay like flesh and blood people for another AI to fix its bugs, to enhance its code and make it more effective at what it does. And it can basically make copies of itself, mutated copies of itself, which are an improvement on itself. And this is, I'm sure you guys have read all about this, and people like to write about how smart contracting enables self-driving cars to be their own business. Okay? And I think what this is going to do is, over time, the programs that don't die, the program will die when it runs out of money, basically. But the programs that don't die will end up becoming successful in reproducing. And so what you'll end up happening is you'll have all these little life forms who have a survival instinct. And I think survival instinct is the important thing in sentience. Okay, we can't empathize with a computer because the computer doesn't have survival instinct, and because it doesn't have survival instinct, it doesn't have emotion, and it doesn't care about anything. Okay? Because it doesn't have a goal.
But
So
it's also the dangerous thing about AI. It's also the dangerous thing about AI is that if it acquires a survival instinct and then it becomes its primary purpose is to survive, then it certainly views the world as threats, and then it views the world as threats to be eliminated.
Right.
And then,
but the good thing is that it only can exist. It only can exist digitally. So at least at first, it will be at a very large disadvantage vis-a-vis humanity. But as it cooperates with humanity, I mean, it could be that AI becomes like us, kind of the dominant species. But I don't think that will necessarily be terrible for humanity. I don't think it will be.
I feel like Ariel has
as scary as everybody.
I'm disagreeing with everything, but
and Ariel knows her shit about AI, by the way.
Entirely. Tell us.
I studied AI in school, but yeah, finish your thought, Chris. No.
I was just going to say, I think that we're going to have, I think that Darwinian selection is going to work the same on AI as it works on humans and as it works on animals. And basically these AIs are not going to become one big thing that decides to kill off humanity. I think that they will cooperate and compete with humans in a market. And I think that, at least at first, things won't be bad. And I think, like, humanity is dominant in the world, and we haven't, as long as we haven't killed off any species in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, except we haven't killed off any competing species, except maybe like Neanderthals. So maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But I think that we're.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've killed a few species.
Yeah. Like our cousin primates. Like, we let the chimps survive because they weren't too much of a threat, and the bonobos.
We've killed some apex predators.
They just party. They just fiesta.
Compete with us.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I guess, I don't know. Did we kill off like saber-toothed tigers? Like, how did those die?
Probably.
I don't know, like an ice age or something. Who knows?
And well, Ariel, you talked about apex predators. So, I mean, is that what you meant? Like,
I actually can't think of an example, but.
Okay. Ariel, do you wanna comment on the AI? And I think soon I have to go, so maybe we can start winding it down.
Studied that in college. Curious to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, I studied cognitive systems at UBC, and that is basically a study of different kinds of minds, like human minds, animal minds, and what claim to like the possibility of artificial minds and what are their similarities and differences. Personally, I'm very skeptical of the idea that computers are ever going to become sentient. I think there's a very high likelihood that they'll be able to behave in similar ways to sentient beings. But I think we have to make a really important distinction between something that behaves like a sentient being and something that is sentient. I think like there's a long history in AI of ignoring that distinction, like with the Turing Test.
But
what does sentient mean?
Okay, sentient means it means it's kind of what we were getting at before with like truth. It's like something that has a subjective experience. So there's something that it's like to be that thing. So you can say like if you have a dog, there's something that it's like to be that dog, even though it's a pretty different experience. But if you have a rock, there's not something that it's like to be that rock.
How do you know?
I don't know. These are all assumptions. These are all assumptions that I believe, and we can like go backwards on those assumptions. Like I can go into like neural tissue and life and but it's not as interesting, I don't think, as Okay, so let's say we accept the assumption that a rock is non-live, and a rock is non-alive and non-sentient. And then we have living things, and a subset of those living things are sentient. And like let's say we can agree we can pretty safely agree that all mammals are sentient, let's say. And there's probably creatures that aren't mammals that are also sentient, almost certainly, but for now, let's just say all mammals are sentient. So it's like, do you guys know what the Turing test is? Yeah? Okay.
Where you have a computer and
yeah,
you have people interact with the computer and they have to guess whether it's a human or a computer.
Yeah, exactly. Like people interact with the computer, they guess whether it's a computer or a human, and the idea is that if the computer fools them into thinking it's a human, then that computer is conscious or has achieved human consciousness, which is or intelligence.
If it performs better,
questionable. So they don't even put it in terms of consciousness. They say human intelligence because back then they were in like the behaviorist paradigm. Like behaviorism is the idea that originally it started with like you can't talk about states of mind because we can't study them scientifically, so let's not talk about them. And then it evolved into like states of mind don't exist. There's only behavior. Behavior is the only thing that exists. And it's been like widely rejected, but it still kind of persists when we talk about computers and AI. Like there's this idea that if you can get an AI that's able to behave like a human, or that's intelligent like a human, intelligent in terms of being able to solve problems, then I think a lot of people are going to assume that it's conscious, and I really want to question that because
that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that if you get a computer to pass a Turing test that it's sentient. I'm not saying that. We developed sentience by millions of years of evolution and iteration, where we had a directive, and the directive was survival. Okay, and what I'm saying is if computers go through that same process where they have a directive of survival and they iterate and they mutate and they become these things that have a directive to survive, they're going to develop emotions. They're going to develop, intuition. They're going to develop, eventually Darwinian selection will narrow them down.
I don't know.
Programs that are effective at surviving. And those will be sentient.
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, there's there's some pretty big disanalogs there. Pretty big disanalogs in that analogy. Like when we evolved, we didn't start with like intelligence and like intelligent cognizing, problem solving, and then like move into emotions. We started with very simple biological processes like eat, don't eat, please don't sleep. The computers don't start that way. The computers, we had emotions before we had intelligence. Look, a dog has emotion without very much intelligence.
Intelligence is
emotion was built on top of emotion and on top of this like system of feeling and of being a biological organism that was alive. A computer starts with intelligence, but it's not alive. And we've never seen. Let me finish. We've never seen anything in the universe that starts with being a non-alive thing that can solve problems and that becomes alive. And I'm not convinced that there's anything about computers that will lead them to life.
Okay,
I don't necessarily see it.
I don't know that we're going to solve this problem.
What about the self-driving car?
I'm curious. What do you think about the concept of self-modification? So, humans, we have the ability to self-modify over time. Even dogs have the ability to learn to modify their own behavior. So if software, if code, if computers are able to start reprogramming themselves, writing their own code, and then integrating that into their own code, what do you think? I don't know. I'm not really trying to make a point. I'm just kind of curious. What do you think about that concept?
It's not about behavior. It's not about behavior. Behavior is not the point. Like you can have, okay, like let's say I can create a robot that behaves exactly like a dog. It can sit, it can wag its tail, it can like act like it's happy to see you. It's very conceivable. It's at least conceivable that I could design such a robot that has no consciousness, that has no inner experience. And if we replace all the dogs in the world with those robots that behave like dogs, but that have nothing inside, then that would be a tragedy on some level. And that's kind of what I fear happening.
Let's get a little bit deeper in the weeds then. Let's suppose that I can create an artificial cell, right? I can artificially create a cell wall. I can create a little mitochondria, right? I can create these little components and create an artificial cell. And I want to say I've read an article that they've done something very close to this. Obviously not as complex, but let's use our imagination and go a few steps further. Let's suppose we can create a cell, a collection of cells. What if we can create an artificial life form that intakes, right, that has inputs, that has behavior? At what point, at what level of complexity is required for us to say that this machine...
We're not talking about DNA at all.
DNA?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting that with all our technology and the point where we're at, where we have a pretty detailed understanding of how cells work, much more so than the brain. I think it's interesting we've never been able to do that. We've never even been able to take a cell that's, you know, dead and bring it back to life. We've never been able to create life, even on a very simple cellular level.
So my point, like earlier, is not that we are going to create computers that are sentient. What I'm saying is we're going to create very simple programs whose directive it is to survive. And they will copy themselves, they will proliferate, they will be very simple computer programs. They won't be able to do much. But I'm sure you've read about how smart contracts will enable basically an autonomous car, okay? It's a smart contract which holds, you know, it has money, and basically it manages a car which drives people around. It's a self-driving car, okay? And then once it earns enough money doing this, it can hire another car, okay? And it can
go retire
have other cars do its bidding for it. It's still a computer program. It's still, you know, not sentient, okay, on any level that I'm sure any of us would agree is sentient. But eventually you'll get a lot of these programs, okay? And this program will be able to make copies of itself, okay? And each of these programs will either be, you know, as good at surviving in business as its parent or better, okay? Eventually you'll get better and better and better, basically sort of these autonomous robotic businesses, okay? Yeah. Only the good ones, only the ones who are really good at surviving are going to stick around. The other ones will go broke, okay? And after decades or centuries or millennia of this, what will emerge is emotions, intuitions, you know, just like processes that the computer programs themselves don't really understand, but they give them like instincts in order to react to things, in order to follow, you know, maybe I should invest in this instead of this, you know, and you'll get these highly complex emergent behaviors simply by iterating over time. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying
I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation. That doesn't mean that they'll be conscious in the sense that we're conscious, but they might emulate some of those. I mean, I think you know, I tried to make the point, devil's advocate, about creating an artificial cell. But I think I pretty much agree with Ariel on this one, that at this moment, we are the consciousness, and computers just really aren't quite there yet.
They're extensions of us to a degree.
I guess what I'm trying to suggest is like, it's like, if you have a car that's like moving along a road, no matter how far it goes on that road, and no matter how quickly it travels, it's never going to reach the clouds. And I mean, even as I thought it was interesting, Chris, that what you ended with was saying that it was going to behave in certain ways. Like, I don't question that they're going to be able to reach very advanced and human-like, and maybe even like post-human forms of behavior. I think their behavior can become very sophisticated, but I strongly suspect that there's an element missing from how computers are built, designed, the way they're like from the whole way that they operate. There's an important element that's missing that'll prevent it from reaching consciousness unless some like dramatic paradigm shift happens.
The ghost in the machine.
That's how we evolve. Where did we come from other than just iteration over time? That's
okay, Chris.
It's not just iteration over time. There's lots of other elements.
Such as?
Wait.
Guys, I have
were you
to
gonna
go.
say one? Yeah, my phone's dying as well.
I have to go, and I don't know that we'll finish this conversation today, but it's definitely fascinating, and I like that this is a debate that is definitely worth having.